Hi, everybody. I'm Dan McDermott. This is Google Plus Week. Welcome. Good to have you with us. Ready to go is Alan Furstenberg in New York. Welcome, Alan.
Hey, Dan.
All right. So this kid brought a clock to school and made some news. And then I'm seeing, so I guess it looked like a bomb to
No, no.
Andy Griffith and Barney Fife in the school. But tell us what the deal is. I have not seen a photograph of the clock. Do we have that? Is it reasonable that
Yes.
someone would think looks like a bomb?
No,
Would it look
no.
like a bomb if a Muslim kid was carrying it? Ah,
That I can
that's
say.
the point of the story. Go ahead. Tell us what the story
I mean,
is.
here's the thing. Okay, so 14-year-old kid, freshman, first week or so in high school. In his middle school, he had a robotics after school program. He had a bunch of other engineering type things. Was looking to get this sort of thing started again in high school. So 20 minutes one evening, he put together a clock based, with some spare parts that he had
And that's the
lying
thing
around.
he does. He's into.
Yeah, he's into tinkering. This is not an unusual thing these days. Um, Brings us into school, and we should point out that he's in a high school in Texas, and he's Muslim. Brings it into school, shows it to his engineering teacher. His engineering teacher says, "Good job. Don't show it to anyone." However, he makes a little mistake. The alarm in the clock accidentally goes off in the middle of a different class. That teacher confiscates it from him, sends it to the principal's office. Later, he gets sent to the principal's office, where there are a bunch of cops standing there asking him, "What is this?" He says, "It's a clock." They say, "No, really, what is it?" He says, "It's a clock." At which point they arrest him for or under the for having a hoax bomb. Eventually, the police department arrest him, march him out in handcuffs, business like that. Eventually, he is released without them pressing any charges, but not before a picture of him in handcuffs and the story goes wild. And by wild, I mean absolutely wild. It hit Facebook, it hit Google Plus. I was out for most of the day, and when I got back, my feed was filled with it like I've never seen any other story fill my feed. He got offers from NASA because he was wearing a NASA t-shirt at the time he was arrested. He got offers from Twitter, from Google Science Lab, invited him to come show his clock. He got offers from Facebook to come tour the offices. He got offers from Jet Propulsion Laboratory, from MIT, from the White House. So he's, comes off as very good in this whole thing, and the school comes off as a pack of idiots, which is a reasonable assessment of the school.
Okay, so I got to say real quick. I'm testing the Facebook Live real quick. So I'm do this. So we'll get some folks, hopefully. But I just so folks are wondering. I just cut it on now. We're talking about this kid. We're doing a weekly tech show. We're talking about the kid with the clock, right? The Islamic kid. Here's what I don't understand, Alan. If they thought it was a bomb, why would they have summoned the kid to the office? Why would they not have? You'd think the bomb squad and lockdown. You know what I mean?
Well, clearly they didn't think it was a bomb. They thought it was a hoax bomb.
So this is like, okay, it's a water pistol. We know there's no threat, but you're still getting suspended
Right.
because we have a
You're,
no
you're,
tolerance.
you still did something you weren't supposed to do. You brought in, part of a bomb, or you brought in something and you were going to threaten people with it. But he wasn't threatening people with it. It's clear the school had a zero tolerance policy, which basically said anything outside of a number 2 pencil in a pencil box, that's not allowed. So when they went and enforced the zero tolerance policy, they kept enforcing it. And if you don't have two cell brains to rub together, or brain cells to rub together, That's what you get. You get zero tolerance policies. You get arresting a kid for actually trying to be smart.
You saw a picture? Would it be reasonable for someone to think that this was a hoax bomb, or was it so wildly? Did it look like a clock, or did it look like
I mean, it looked like, if you, I don't know if you have a digital clock, Dan, but if you can picture that without the case, that's what it looked like. It looked
Okay.
like you had the LED display, you had a circuit board, you had a transformer. The transformer was attached to the plug, and running into the whole thing was also a 9-volt battery lead. That was it. And some cables connecting them. And not even a lot of cables, like
But
one or two cables.
but there were no surrounded by shrapnel with large sticks, tape. Nothing
It,
you'd
it
think.
was it was in a pencil case.
Hmm.
We're not talking anything that vaguely resembles a bomb, unless you have looked at cheesy Hollywood stories from the 70s or so that, has a couple of wires and a circuit board to make things look high tech. If your only knowledge of bombs is what you saw in 40-year-old movies, maybe you would think it was a bomb. Maybe. Unless, of course, you actually have a digital clock, because it resembled a digital clock astoundingly well.
It technically was a digital clock.
Yeah, there's a reason why it resembled a digital clock astoundingly well.
So I was looking. I saw some
But
stuff.
to give the English teacher some credit, I'm the kind of person who has taken apart who has broken open digital clocks. I suppose if you're the sort of person who has no curiosity, creativity, knowledge, scientific background, any of those, then yeah, maybe if you don't know what you're talking about, you might think it was a bomb. Of course, you might also think that, an empty lunchbox is a bomb.
So I was looking. On. I saw the thing online. One of a friend, actually a friend of Craig Ships, who I've friended because he puts these really great posts up sometimes. But he's a pretty conservative fellow, and he posted this thing: "What we know about the clock kid's dad," right, from some right wing site. So I went there, and I looked at it, and they said it was some young conservative site, and then like a Breitbart thing. But apparently the guy, his dad, this is weird. Remember the guy who was burning the Koran in church? This kid's dad, actually was the defense attorney for the Koran in a mock trial of the Koran at Terry whatever his name's church, right? And then another time he did something else. He's run for president of Sudan twice, from Texas, where he was a hot dog vendor, or he was a New York City hot dog vendor. I forget. So of course they're drawing this conclusion that this is all a setup, right? But it's an interesting story about the guy's dad. But I just I don't see the arresting the kid, especially when they talked to the first teacher who said, I made a clock. I mean, you think it was an innocent mistake, or do you think it was like, hey, let's lock up the Arab kid, or somewhere in between?
I think it was a combination of three things, to be honest. The first was the tremendous amount of scientific illiteracy that is out there today. The second is the truly abysmal zero tolerance policies that we have in our schools. And the third is that he was not a white Christian. I think that combination of things was what led to this. Because if any of that had been different, then it would have gone very differently. In fact, we've seen, things that have been coming out since are reports of white kids who have brought their science, their digital clock science projects, or their nuclear bomb science projects to school and not gotten arrested.
They've won contests with their volcano or whatever. Yeah, so I
The
guess
volcano with things that look like bombs, and in some cases were bombs.
yeah. Okay. So I guess you don't want to bring your, whatever, One of the sites said, "Well, just being prudent. You never know with these
I'm
Arab."
sorry, that's bullshit. I'm sorry, that was the second point that I brought up, is that we have this attitude now of, oh, we have to make things perfectly safe and perfectly secure. And A, we're not going to. And B, in doing so, we're immensely stifling the desire for learning that kids can have. And I don't just mean in science and technology.
Okay,
I
so
mean any field.
is it fair to say this is akin? Two questions. Is it fair to say this is akin to someone has a charm bracelet, and one of the things was a little tiny gun, and the school overreacts and says you have a mock gun and suspends the kid for 3 days? Is this just sort of an overreaction to, these zero obviously there's no policy against bringing a mock bomb. I mean, I would assume that no one had thought of that.
Sure there is. Obviously, it's a law in Texas.
Oh, okay. If the kid looked like you or me instead of like a kid from the Sudan, which he's the grandson of, or the son of a guy from the Sudan, would the result have been the same?
I think we've seen evidence that it's not. And it's not so much that he brought it, it's that they didn't believe him when he said it was just a clock. They asked him multiple times, what is this? And every time he said, it's a clock. And they said, no, what is it?
Wouldn't a bomb have some sort of like
Explosive?
and shrapnel or some sort of thing? You know what I mean?
Maybe they're only used to dealing with stupid bomb makers because, that's the level of competence of the school officials. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
We already have comments on this, by the way.
Oh, okay, good.
And I've only just started. Cybernaut was trying to say it looked like a fake bomb. No, it didn't look like a fake bomb. It looked like a digital clock. Now, if you think that digital clocks look like fake bombs, that might be true. But by that token, my phone now looks like a bomb, and we're starting to get into some really, really strange territory.
To be fair, though, you are the geeky kid who got the Radio Shack kit and did fun stuff. These cops probably, and the teacher, it was okay. Which subject teacher said, "Oh, that's awesome," but put it away, and the other which teacher like freaked out?
My understanding is that it was the engineering teacher who said, "That's good job, put it away, don't show anyone."
Okay.
And it was in his English class that the alarm went off.
Okay. That makes sense.
Now, granted, here's the thing. The English teacher probably did the right thing and said, hey, you've got something that is disturbing my class. I'm sending it to the principal's office. It and you to the principal's office. What happened, though, is that the principal then said, hey, this looks like a bomb to me.
So I'm going to typecast here because out of ignorance, and I could be very wrong, but as a former high school teacher myself, I can tell you that most public school principals are from phys ed or math. Mainly, a lot of them are phys ed. They may not be the geeky kid who did the Radio Shack thing. They may not recognize this. So I don't know. I'm not ready to say that it's like clear-cut Islamophobia.
Well, but then here's the thing. Why didn't if he honestly thought it was a bomb, why didn't he evacuate the school? If he honestly thought it was a bomb threat, why didn't he believe the kid when he said it's just a clock?
That's what I don't get.
This is why I'm saying it's this trifecta of things. It's not, and it's not just the fact that he's Muslim. It's not just his ethnicity that's the issue. It's the combination of his ethnicity, the school has a zero tolerance policy, and and this broad-based scientific illiteracy that we have in our country today. And no, I'm not saying that he needed to be the geeky kid, that the principal needed to have been the geeky kid in school. But I would expect an educator to know something about science and technology.
By the way, just real quick, we're going to continue, but I am doing a test on with Facebook Live. If you comment there, I'll see it. It's right in front of me, so I'll be able to respond to you on the video. And welcome, Leslie. So, all right, so yeah, I don't know what to make of this. I would say if as a former teacher, now I was kind of like you. I mean, I was from a very early age playing with very early versions of computers, so I would have. I would have looked at it, and I think it was sage advice for the first teacher to say, keep this, this is cool, but don't let this be a distraction throughout the day, or for whatever reason, don't show it to anybody, right? And then, as you said, the alarm went off in another period. I think that if someone didn't know what it was and they wanted to investigate it further, I think that's warranted. But then I think the calling of the cops thing, because again, like I observed and you observed, if they really thought it was a bomb, they didn't think it was a bomb, or they would have locked the school down. And so I guess they thought it was a mock bomb. But the only reason he would do that is if he was deliberately trying to troll people. I don't know. But I mean, it looks like a win for him, and they're going to be invited to, as you said, the White House and all these other things. You think it was just a clock, or you think that they anticipated something like this? Given the dad's history, I'm 80% it was just a clock, but not 100%.
Given how, let's put it this way. Given the kids I know who would have done something like this, given the people as adults I know now who were kids who would have done something like this, they did not think about it in terms of making a statement. They thought about it in terms of wanting to show off a cool project and not thinking about the consequences.
Okay.
This really has nothing to do with making a statement. I'm pretty confident.
Do you think that he had any indication that, hey, this will be cool, it looks like a bomb? Or do you think he was like shocked at the suggestion that someone might think my simple clock would look like a bomb?
I think he'd be shocked that anybody would think it would look like a bomb.
A Muslim kid with like wires and a gadget, a homemade gadget. Okay. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I hope so. I think that to be suspicious is prudent, but to overreact is sadly typical.
Very sadly typical, and I think it's a problem with our society today. We start wondering why we have this desperate need for science and technology students, and this incident points to why.
Okay. All right. Another victory for school officials. Okay, so anyway, all right, next up, and please comment and we'll read them. And Alan's checking them. So, Alan, you're going to have to explain this a little bit. I read it a couple times. I've read various versions of this, and you are uniquely qualified to explain it since I am uniquely unqualified. Google is 2 billion lines of code all in one place is the takeaway headline from, I think, Wired.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out, like, I wrote a computer program with Pascal and assembler in about 20 years ago, in 93. I wrote it, and then it was published in 94, I think. So that was like one user on a 386 using it at that time. So I know there's like websites with PHP, etc. And then I know, like, when Drudge Report links to them, that they will sometimes fail, right? You'll get the 404 error because they can't handle the traffic. Google, I don't know how they do it. I mean, there's one central IP for Google.com, right? I mean, you can only have one central IP associated with a number, and then it branches off.
Well, you're wrong for two things.
Explain how you can possibly do something that billions of people can use.
There's two things here.
Okay.
One is, no, you can have multiple machines, many hundreds of machines assigned to the same domain name. Two, that's completely irrelevant to this story.
John Jensen says it'd be better if this was full screen on Facebook. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just going to admit that. I've never used this thing. I just got it today.
We should point out that the phrase "I have no idea what you're doing" is Dan's hallmark phrase when it comes to this show.
I'm
Actually,
honest.
I have no idea.
This, you know, what's funny is we literally have twice as many concurrent viewers on Facebook as Google Plus for Google Plus Week. So all right. So anyway, so how does Google work? How do you branch off traffic to various things, and how does it? The most amazing thing is you could put the most obscure thing, and it's all like cached or something. I don't know how they work it. I'm representing the average viewer.
Dan, I mean, if you'd like, I'm happy to talk about this. But that's not this story.
Well, tell me what the story is.
The story is behind everything that Google does. Behind everything, I mean, you, as you claim, you're a computer programmer. So you wrote your program, if I remember correctly, in Turbo Pascal, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I said
okay.
I was a computer program 20 years ago.
Right. So for those of our viewers who are not computer programmers, can you explain to us what a line of code is?
Line of code is an instruction in a higher level, usually in a higher level language, that would do something like make a bell ring or put something on the screen or create an array of some sort.
Great description, Dan. Great description. Okay. The program that you wrote, about how many lines of code was it?
Oh gosh, thousands. I'm not sure. I don't think it was tens of thousands. It may have been tens of thousands. It was a continuous loop that waited for input of some sort. And it just waited for you to hit a key or a mouse, and then it would react based on whatever else happened. It was a lot of stuff in databases, but all in an array to be quick. Because back then you were really concerned about speed because the computer hardware was not where it is today.
Okay, so it was, let's call it 10,000 lines of code. Just off, roughly.
Fair.
Okay. Microsoft Windows, which is a fairly advanced and fairly sophisticated program, is about 50 million lines of code. Everything that lives under google.com, search, all of their cloud computing stuff, all of their back-end services, Maps, Google+, AdSense, everything totals roughly 2 billion lines of code. I'm now suddenly tempted to go look up how many lines of code were on the space shuttle. But I'm not going to, because you're going to have me. Why don't you go look that up while I'm talking? So 2 billion lines of code. And that's actually only the first part of what's neat about this. The second part is that every single one of those 2 billion lines of code are in a single central repository, and every Google engineer can check it out and access any part of it. And not just access any part of it, edit any part of it.
Wow. So it's like a Google Doc where you can edit it live, but they'll keep track of changes. So if something goes awry.
You don't edit it live. That's one of the differences. You don't edit it live. You can edit your copy of it, and you can play with it and test it.
400,000 lines of code on the space shuttle, the primary.
400,000. And Google is 2 billion.
But to be fair, wouldn't the space shuttle, a lot of that stuff would be manually controlled stuff?
On the shuttle? You know how much isn't manually controlled?
I don't know, but I mean, 400,000 is not a lot, but wouldn't a lot of it just been humans operating a machinery? I mean, this was technology from the 50s and 60s, right?
No, it was technology from the 70s.
The technology was? I mean, no, the ships were built then, but...
No, the technology was. They redid all of the technology. I mean, the technology on the shuttle was far more advanced than technology on the moon lander.
Yeah.
Way more advanced. And in fact, they upgraded the hardware multiple times. But, but every single engineer has access to all 2 billion lines of code. They can check it out. They can fiddle with it. They can play with it. They can test it on their local environment in a way that doesn't disrupt everything else. And if they make a change that they think is good, they can submit that back for somebody else, usually a lot of somebody else's, to take a look at and slowly work its way towards production. Put it in a few test environments, a few review environments, and then maybe eventually go into production.
Incredible. Obviously now, they're a mature company and they've got a lot of experience doing this sort of thing. But how you go? Is this unusual, or is this how they all do it? I mean, was this like a known thing that they just sort of went into that everyone else does, or how do you handle this kind of
One
traffic?
of the things that the article talked about a little bit was that a lot of big companies are doing this now. So Facebook is the same way. It's a huge code base that all of their engineers have access to. And part of what enables them to do this is very sophisticated code control systems, so that you can't just send something live, so that you can have access to this huge repository of knowledge and already solved solutions. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If somebody's done it already, you just take advantage of that. Now, mind you, you wouldn't know that from looking at things like Google Photos, but this is the power that they have out there. And from my conversations with Google engineers, a big part of your early days on your job are learning not just your specific domain, whatever it is you're working on, but how you can take advantage of this massive code base and do something with it, because that's just incredible power at your hands. To finish answering your question, though, is everyone doing it these days? A lot of companies are. It's a very common way to address the problem of when you've got a lot of things and you've got a lot of engineers who are working on those things, how do you do it in a sane manner?
It's incredible because I can't imagine. When I wrote my game, it was me. I had assembler routines for graphics, and then I wrote the main thing in Pascal, and I could have used C++ or I could have used BASIC, but Visual Basic or whatever. But it was a DOS game. I couldn't use Visual Basic. And Pascal's the thing I knew the best, and it was more for fun. But then it got more professional. And anyway, I could just write it, and I put comments in there and stuff like that. But if I were to look at it now, it would take me a while to get up to speed on it. The moment you have more than one person, I can't imagine. It forces you to enforce a lot of discipline. Things like meaningful identifiers, really making sure you comment on your code. I'm not sure what other things. Well, when you have thousands of people potentially doing it, my God, I can't imagine how they could test it in a bubble, and then I guess they roll it out to 5% and see if there's metrics that they can get, like how many people submit a bug feedback or that sort of thing.
This is why sometimes changes in Google Plus in any Google product take a while, take a lot longer than you think. It's because they're not just going to push out untested code. They've got a lot of work that goes into it. Now, fortunately, Google is also at the forefront of automated test systems. So a lot of when code changes go in, it automatically runs through a whole battery of tests to make sure nothing broke. Now, it's not perfect, so even after that, it goes through human testing. A lot of companies do things like code reviews, so that before a change gets integrated, the person who is proposing the change has to go before a bunch of other engineers and say, here's what I'm doing, and here's why, and here's how it's not going to break.
I know that I've seen certain aspects of Google be extremely quick, like the caching of suggested search results, how they do that so quickly from California to Virginia, whereas I'm typing it just magically suggests, even if it's something I've never searched for before, so it wasn't like preloaded for me. Go ahead.
Now you're getting into a different question. And that was the other half of your question, and that's how in the world does Google do what it does so well?
And so quickly, speed.
Right, and the answer there boils down to something that they started working on really early in their history. It's basically massively. In fact, it's the core of one of their earliest patents called MapReduce. And it boils down to how can we take a question, distribute it over as many servers as we can, and then condense the results very quickly. How can we do that? That was the core of Google's early days, is they figured out how to do that early on, and nobody else knew how yet. So Google, if you look at a Google data center, there are tens of thousands of computers there that are doing this sort of querying. So when you're typing in your search query, it's not just hitting one machine, it's hitting a dozen machines that are all working to get you that answer as quickly as possible.
So I had a similar situation, and this, the divide and conquer thing, I figured out. I forget how I figured it out. I'm sure I read something or just thought about it. I think I thought about it. I was having a problem where it was a mail server. It was I think it was called the iPad, the Internet Protocol Adapter. It was part from ESOF, from the Phil Becker guy. And I think it was that or something, or I was writing some code for something. But I was having a problem where the disk seek time was causing a steadily growing period of time to find the file, because it was having to search through this long directory of files. Then I said, you know what? I bet if I created 26 directories, A, B, C, D, and then put like Furstenberg in the F directory, or maybe in the FI directory, and then my name would be in the MC directory or something like that. And I mean, it was lightning fast compared to before. I just divided it, right?
Yep. These days they call that sharding. So you have databases that handle just a tiny part of everything. And the magic boils down to, how do you know which database is the one that's handling that? Facebook, for example, has done tremendous amounts of work in multiple parallel databases, that each of which just handle a tiny bit of their massive amount of data in real time.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly stuff, like I commented on the desktop version on this Facebook thing we're doing, and I said, just testing this or whatever, and I look down on my phone, immediately it pops up. So, and they got at any given time, I think they have over 1 billion people using the service in some form or another, perhaps on mobile or desktop, or just liking something, but that's a lot of people. I don't care how active they are or inactive.
I don't think they've got 1 billion simultaneous. 100 million simultaneous I could believe, but not 1 billion simultaneous.
Okay.
Considering they only have 1.4 billion active users. Probably
during this program it creeps up toward 1 billion liking and commenting. Okay.
Well, but so basically then you're talking, now you're talking about, you've got this massively distributed system. You're massively distributing it worldwide. So you need to keep a bunch of different computers in sync. All of this is certainly technically possible, but Google and Microsoft and Facebook have done tremendous amounts of work, and Amazon is the other big player in this field, have done tremendous amounts of work to do this and to do it as efficiently as possible. And
all right.
they've done it. I mean, the fact that some of the computers that Google ran with initially were no more powerful than the desktop computers we were buying then. They were just using 1,000 of them.
And I heard these aren't fancy computers, right? These are like piece of crap, and they build them together, or themselves, they build them, right?
They've gotten a little more sophisticated since the early days, when, yes, they would buy the cheapest computers they could and strip them down.
How do they back it up? The last I heard, it was a lot of tapes. Is it still tapes? What's the cheapest way to back up a lot of data? Just multiple locations?
The cheapest way these days is just have multiple locations of spinning disks.
And just cross your fingers that...
Well, no. It's to have it in multiple locations.
Okay.
For all I know, they do have tapes still. I guess I could... you know what? I do know somebody who works on site reliability engineering, so I could ask them. They probably won't give me an answer, but But these days, it wouldn't surprise me if just the best solution was just to throw more disk at it.
Okay. I know for like a local solution, you could.
With I should point out, and this is actually another one of Google's brilliant ideas, with the assumption that it's going to fail. You're
Yeah, of
going to
course.
have you're going to have hard disk failures. You're going to have computer failures. Plan for them and make it bulletproof even in the face of those.
Just like what the government does, they have a doomsday plane, they have um, a deterrent weapons effect. I guess it's like anything else. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Um,
No, that's not what this is, though.
assume
This isn't prevention. This is assuming you're going to get sick.
every single standalone hard drive I've ever bought has crashed and caused all the data to be lost on it if I didn't have a backup.
By
Every single
definition, they
one.
will.
It's a moving part. Every car will eventually stop driving. You know, people the same way. I mean, you have a lifespan. Okay, so all right, so Google is pretty big.
And to clarify, I said shard. I didn't say shart. I don't know where you thought got that one from. But
Is
Sai's been commenting all along on this. He points out he could have been that kid, and in his mind, there should be no consequence to making and showing off something you made. He talks about round robin DNS, GeoIP location for Google, equates to hundreds, if not thousands, of IPs worldwide. He thinks 2 billion seems sparse. I don't know. I've got no sense of scale, to be perfectly honest. I just know that it's a couple of orders of magnitude bigger than Windows, which sounds about right to me. But search itself, how big could search be, right? It's just search. Thank
all
you,
right.
Dan, for the reaction finally.
Well, obviously the code would be less than the data that they have. I can't imagine how big. I mean, they've scraped everything. Um,
I
so
So yeah, Sai seems to be the only one watching us this evening. We've got nobody on YouTube Live.
no, we
How's
got
the
like a half
Facebook
dozen
comment,
there. We got
Dan?
13. We got 13 live on John Jensen says that he's switched all over to iOS products. I've got both now. I've got iOS and
We'll be
Android
talking about that
tablets
in a
and
bit.
phones. Yeah. Um, all right, so let's move to. I have to take a leak, and this would be a good time because Alan's going to be all about this. The inaugural Android Development Summit.
Make it quick, Dan, because I'm just going to insult these guys for a few minutes.
It's interesting that they're not calling it the inaugural annual Android Summit, right? Like, didn't they do this disastrous YouTube Awards thing? And I think it's been over a year ago. Have they done it again?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the second annual YouTube Music Awards, wasn't it?
Oh, okay.
At any rate, no. This is. I don't think they're
What's this
calling it
about?
annual because none of the other developer summits are called annual developer summits. So, hot on the heels of the Polymer Summit, which was earlier this week, and the Chrome Developer Summit, which is in the middle of November, the Android team has announced that they are also going to have a developer summit because I/O apparently is not enough of a developer summit for the Android team. Who knows why? And they brilliantly announced that it was going to be, I believe it's the third week or the fourth week in November in Mountain View, California. Developers who come in will be able to meet members of the Android developer team, learn a bit more about Android development, presumably get some interesting facts about Android 6.0, which will have launched by then, I think, because it's got to launch with a bunch of the new phones that are going to be out by then. And do all sorts of fun and exciting things. This is, of course, assuming you can get a flight to Mountain View. Because some brilliant idiot decided to schedule the summit for the week of Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Or, the beginning of the week of Thanksgiving, But honestly, trying to find a flight anywhere on Tuesday evening for the week of Thanksgiving, next to impossible. That just has to be one of the stupidest planning decisions I have ever seen. And this
Thanksgiving
is coming from a
Day.
team that's made some pretty stupid planning decisions.
Thanksgiving Day is the best time to travel around Thanksgiving, I think, right?
Not even anymore. It's still packed.
Well, for me to go to from Front Royal to Stevens City, Virginia is not a big deal. But anyway, okay, so that'll be exciting. And you're going or not?
Oh, hell no. No, I want to be safely back in my house by that week.
Are they
I
streaming
don't
everything?
What was that?
They streaming everything?
Yeah, they're streaming everything.
Other than when, like, you go to I/O every year, other than the goodie bag and seeing the keynote and seeing the stars that occasionally come out, like Sergey was in it one year, Larry the next. Other than that sort of thing, seeing your favorite artist perform on stage versus the record, is it really worth the hassle versus just watching? Because most of the stuff is streamed anyway. Obviously, you don't get the interaction, but is it worth it?
Dan, do you ever fucking read my posts?
On I/O, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I have a whole category, a whole collection, which I realize you don't understand collections, but I have a whole collection called I/O 2015, in which I posted a whole bunch of things about my time at I/O this year. And
well, naturally, I read all of your posts in depth at the time, as I
don't even
always
need
do.
to-
But I may
Dan,
have slipped
I don't
my
even
mind.
think you needed to read them in depth to notice the fact that just about every other post of mine said, the great thing about going to I/O are the people that you talk to. No, that's really what it's about.
Well,
It's
I did
about,
that caveat. I said, and
no,
obviously,
no, no. You said meeting stars and meeting the rock stars. I'm talking about just meeting other Android developers.
just the personal
I'm talking
networking you
about
can't
meeting
replicate.
the people that are, that you want to talk to later when you have a problem.
Do they
It's
have any
not-
interaction? Like, let's say you're in a session, one of the work sessions, where they're doing a dog and pony show, or developers are asking questions, and it's not one of the big rock star things. It's, some one of the conference rooms somewhere, and there might be like 100 people in there or something. Is there an online component where folks who couldn't get in, or maybe couldn't afford to, like some young developer in Botswana or Germany or wherever, where they can sort of participate in any way, or is it just they're watching and they can comment and swap stuff after the fact? Is there any kind of, like, do they cater at all to the people who aren't in the room?
What they generally try to do, what they encourage people to do who aren't in the room, is to team up with local developer groups. So, for example, during the Polymer Summit, my local developer group had an online summit because it was, at an unreasonable time for us to hang out in person. During I/O, they encourage local local groups to have I/O viewing parties and I/O hackathons and I/O code labs, so that you have this hands-on personal experience, even if you're not going to be at at the hub of what's going on.
There's a Polymer Summit.
Yes.
Is there an alloy summit where metallurgists gather? I'm sorry. I'm all for the Polymer Summit.
Actually, there is, Dan. There's a summit all about Chrome. It's really cool.
Oh my God! And
You ask a stupid question, I'll give you a stupid answer.
they listen to at the Alloy Summit. They listen to cassette tapes of Johnny Ive doing his speeches and get a little bit randy.
I can bet you the Android Summit is going to be talking about materials all over the place.
On that note, speaking of Android, you'll soon be able to stream Android games live to YouTube for YouTube Live. I think that's genius.
I think it's absolutely flippin' brilliant, and it would be wonderful if it actually, hooked up to a fucking camera. Oh my fucking God!
Can you elaborate? Why can't they
I don't know. Can they?
I would think that
Instead
you'd
of
be able
actually
to
trying
play it. What if
record
you
the
could play a
freaking
game?
screen, can I just record what my fucking camera shows and stream that shit live? Because, you know, Periscope and Meerkat have fucking figured it out. Why the fuck can't Google?
I don't understand what you're saying. You want to be able to play the game and have like
Now,
YouTube
I want
Live
to be
for
I
like.
want to be able to walk around with my phone and like live stream.
Well, you can do it on Meerkat. I'm currently doing it on Facebook, and you can do it on Periscope.
That's what I'm saying, Dan.
I mean, you could
Can
Jimmy
you do
rig
it?
it.
Can you do it on YouTube Live?
Yes, but it would be a Jimmy rig, a jury rig, whatever you want to say.
So it's wonderful that you can, you know, live stream Flappy Bird. That's great. I'm thrilled to hear it. I can't wait to watch the live stream of people playing 2048. These are great things.
Basically, the Hoover Dam.
But honestly, I think YouTube has gotten game obsessed, and that's wonderful because, you know, they've now beaten Twitch, and they're just going to get pounded into the ground by Facebook and Twitter. Fine, whatever.
All right, so I think it's genius, obviously, but it would be neat if I agree with you, and we've been clamoring for this for a long time. Folks like me and Sarah Hill, early advocates of using Hangouts as a broadcast journalism platform. It would be great if, you know, I think at the time the Syrian thing was just starting, and I said, what if you had some protesters, and instead of like recording stuff and smuggling memory sticks to somebody with an internet connection, then they upload on YouTube, and then everyone's wondering, is this legit or fake? Have they quote unquote photoshopped it? It's live. Like we're down in back. Of course, I guess you need Wi-Fi, or you need some sort of LTE or whatever, 3G something.
And
But
remember, we've done this. We've done this 3 years ago at the Canadian student protests. We had somebody who was there with a laptop and a backpack and a camera attached to it, live streaming to a Hangout.
those are extraordinarily expensive setups. Whereas with
It was
Meerkat,
ridiculously expensive
anybody
rig, yes, but it should be doable with a fucking cell phone now.
yeah, somebody with some shitty like old iPhone can do Periscope. With some burner Android phone can do Meerkat, and it'd be neat if you could play the game, and it would stream your screen and your play. And in addition to that, you could optionally turn on the front-facing screen, and it could do a thumbnail, the way that YouTube star guy, I forget his name. He's like from Sweden or something. What he does.
And yeah, I just don't get why YouTube hasn't rushed something like this out.
They should
I
be
just
teaching
don't
the
get it.
others. They should be leading the way. And if it's not for lack of our bitching about the absence of such a feature, I can tell
Because
you
they
that.
listen to us plenty.
Yeah. All right. So Alan's very excited about that new feature. So Apple's move to iOS app for Android is getting trolled. It's not faring well in the comments on Android. But I know
You know,
people who have switched back and forth. Bruce Turner, our friend in Lynchburg, switched from an iPhone to Android and isn't looking back. I use an iPhone as my main phone. I still have a Note 2 and I have an Nexus 7 tablet. I have an iPad. I have both. Both offer advantages, and they continuously up their game on both platforms. And I think, wasn't there a move to Android app first? And so this isn't.
no.
I thought there was. I thought there are. I think like 6 months or a year ago, I heard about some prominent had a move from iOS to Android app. And there are tools. There have been tools.
There have been tools, but largely switch to Android. Android.com/switch.
I think we talked about this on the show.
Yeah, we did. But mostly it's it's more a set of rules. There's no one app that does it.
If you switch from Android to iPhone, you should not move your contacts because contacts are so broken in Android. The Google Contacts, I mean, it's like anybody's ever Gmailed you. It creates a contact record to the point where you get crazy errors. You can't do anything. You can't find anybody. It's a disaster. I try to find an old phone number, and I can't because it fails. It's too big to load, and I get this red error that says your contacts trouble loading. We're working on a fix. Click here for help. You click there, and it says nothing. And then you do a search for that specific error message, and you find posts from like 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. If you have a lot of contacts, and I think mine are in like the teens of thousands, 15,000, 18,000, something like that, that it just can't handle that volume. So as good as Google may be with their billions of lines of code, they can't handle my 15,000 contacts without crashing. So, if you can't find a number from a couple years ago because the contacts won't load and it fails, it errors out, then, what point is saving that? It's just wasted data. So anyway, anything noteworthy to say on the move to iOS app other than they're getting trolled as you would expect in the Android comments?
Just a few things. One, I think that the trolling is stupid, to be honest. If you're going to give it a 1-star rating, give it a 1-star rating based on how the app actually works, not, the fact that you haven't used the damn thing and have no ever intention of using the damn thing. That I think is an unfair move on some people's part.
But trolls troll, and Android doesn't own trolling. I mean, they're just as bad on the Apple side.
No, but you know what? Here's the thing. I think it's a poor, Android users like to talk about how they're smarter and better than Apple users. This isn't showing it. Of course, Apple users like to say the same thing. One. Two, you have to wonder if there would ever be such an app on iOS. I have to think no, there wouldn't, because Apple wouldn't allow it. Of course, Apple might allow it because if they didn't, they'd get an antitrust lawsuit. I had a 3, but I don't remember what it was. It's fine. I honestly don't see it as a big deal. The big deal that a lot of people were making about it is that it actually, the way that it does it is in some ways kind of clever. Instead of trying to upload it to the cloud, it uses either peer-to-peer or an ad hoc local network to send the data over, which you'd think would be this remarkable thing, except that Android's done that sort of thing for a few years now.
Okay. All right, so trolls are trolling. Breaking news. We should have put that at the very top of the show. All right, so Apple, the story is Apple meets California regulators about self-driving car. And I think that later after this story, I think the regulator in California confirmed that they had met. So this could be on any level of, they're releasing a car next week, or they're just curious about how the rules work. What do you think? I mean, we see Google, of course, has famously got a prototype fleet. We see that Uber is very interested. Tesla's interested. I think Uber's been poaching Tesla's employees to work toward a driverless car because Uber has probably the most to gain if they can come up with driverless taxis that would cut out a huge percentage of their cost. We're going to this.
Yeah, Uber doing this interests me for a different reason, because it's basically Uber kind of underlying their own argument about Uber drivers. So I think it's an odd move by Uber in a couple of ways. I probably should pull Jason in on that conversation.
What do you think? I don't want to get this topic off track, but you're in New York. I'm sure I assume you've used Uber. My sister loves
Uber,
it.
but not in New York.
Say again? I'm sorry.
I've used Uber, but not in Manhattan. And I've used Lyft in San Francisco.
You use the mainstream, not the Uber, the black car service. You use the regular, like it could be you or me doing it 5 hours a week when we feel like it.
No, that is the mainstream. To be honest, I've got no idea, because these companies really don't make it obvious what the hell you're doing and what the hell you're signing up
Wasn't it
for.
Uber was the black car service, and they made Uber X, and that was the more affordable version because the black car service was more expensive than a traditional taxi would be.
All of them, no, all of them are more expensive than a traditional taxi.
It was my understanding that now they're less expensive, and that's why the cabs are pissed.
No, the cabs are pissed for other reasons.
Okay. So are we going to see an Apple car, driverless Apple car?
It would be interesting. I'm a little surprised it's even further out of their core competencies than Google, but I don't know. Everyone wants to get in the game these days, I guess.
It'd be so much easier if you could build a city like Reston, Virginia, which was a planned community from the get-go, and it was all driverless, right? Or buy an island. But the problem is they've got to integrate with existing stuff, which slows everything down, the development. It's much more difficult. If it was just driverless cars, for example, like on the floor room of Amazon's warehouses, you see these robots that drive around, right? They've got to maneuver around people, but people know don't cross this line or that sort of thing. But if they were also maneuvering around actual drivers of internal combustion engines and stuff with varying degrees of skill and sobriety, that's a whole different thing. So
If I was going to build a planned city, though, I would get rid of cars completely.
really,
Yeah, why the hell would you want cars?
to get from point A to point B, would you just have a big hyperloop?
We've got a lot of better technology that's cheaper, more efficient, less polluting, more usable than cars. Cars are really a truly disastrous technology.
We need them here because we're so spread out in,
No,
in
we
the
don't.
United States. In rural Virginia, in Texas, you might go 150 miles between two towns with nothing in between. I mean,
Okay,
it's not efficient
cars,
to have a tram. I've lived in London where it's very efficient. There's a great bus system, and there's the tube, the London Underground train system, where you can easily work anywhere in the city, and you can live anywhere else, and you can get home in anywhere from 15 minutes to
Dan,
45 minutes
Dan, Dan, what's the most efficient way to ship 1,000 pounds?
with 1 billion pounds in one compartment.
And that would be in a,
Some sort of train
yes.
but if there's only 100 pounds going from this point to this point, the problem is that in Virginia, or in the United States, in a lot of parts, in the big city, it's a different story. But in a rural area where you have ranches and sort of, that sort of thing, or people living in very spread out, it's not practical to have a subway. They used to have a train here in Bentonville, and you could take the train to Front Royal 8 miles, but then they got rid of it when it was deregulated, not required, because it wasn't efficient. It was more efficient to get a car, to reinvent the wheel in every driveway.
I didn't say subway, I said train.
My neighbors are here, and they're trolling me off
Because it's
camera.
really easy to troll you, Dan. Cars
Indeed.
are good for extremely short-term distances.
Okay. So are we going to see an Apple car? Are we going to see a retail, functional, usable Google car, Apple car, Tesla driverless car, or an Uber taxi first? And I say driverless, not really driverless, right? Because they won't allow it totally driverless. It's got to be a way for you to override it like a driver ed car. But which company is going to have a largely self-driving vehicle first?
That's tough. Uber actually, they did something very clever. They essentially bought out the entire robotics department of Carnegie Mellon. And by doing so, they immediately made themselves one of the leaders in autonomous vehicle design. So I don't know, to be honest. I don't know who's in the lead. I'd say Uber and Google probably have the top staff at this point. Tesla, I'm not sure they're working on driverless cars at all. Their engineers are working on other stuff. And I've got no idea what Apple does.
And of course, all the high-end cars are working on some sort of degree of technology, Vic Indotra famously appeared in a Mercedes commercial because the car was able to stop when he was distracted, and it prevented a rear ending. So we're still inching. Cars on the road today have various degrees of driverless technology built into them. It's just
Well, sure, but we've been doing that for decades. I mean, what is cruise control?
exactly. So it's maybe it's not going to be like, oh, the first driverless car. Maybe it's just going to be a slow evolution rather than a radical appearance.
It's possible. And this is, again, you should get Jason on to talk about it because he's doing a lot of work in this, a lot of research in this field nowadays.
Okay. And there's not a whole lot else going on in Guam. So, anyway. All right. So next is the ad blocker controversy. Apple News came out. It's this new app, which it's the idea.
It's not a new app. It's a new feature in iOS 9.
Okay. So it replaced I don't know, was it Newsroom or News Desk or something app that was the default app on the main screen. It reminds me, I've been playing with it. It's okay. It's beautiful. It reminds me of Flipboard in its appearance, and when Flipboard was good, and also it's like if Flipboard, you did a hybrid with the wonderful Google Stories, the Google Now Stories card, which has finally made an appearance on iOS, which was my favorite aggregator. And so it's the idea you can pick. It's a learning. It's an artificial intelligence thing where you say, like, I'm kind of interested in sports. I'm interested in business news. I'm not really interested in tech news. Whatever your things are, then you can choose their sources. I want CNN. I want ESPN. Whatever you want. And then it kind of looks, and like if you notice, if they see a trend, you're sort of interested in football more than basketball, it will start filtering things to that. So it's got the benefits of the Google Now Stories card mixed with the beautiful nature of the early Flipboard. So I think it's popular, but there's a controversy here where the ads, they're very protective, as Apple typically is. In order to get an ad in, you have to submit it like 48 hours ahead of time, an ad campaign, and they approve every single ad, like a pre-roll video ad. They approve it ahead of time, so they're being anally protective, whereas as Android is looser, and so you can make an argument which you prefer. And some of the advertisers are not thrilled with that. And then also the general, let's combine this with the topic of the ad blocking technology that has been unleashed with iOS 9. And there's a lot of talk about that. How do you make money online if you can't show the ads? And the other side would say, wait a minute, and I see both sides here because I get as irritated as anybody else when I get to some shitty site and it's got this big pop-up ad and I have to wait. I want the content, but at the same time, I also earn all of my money from advertising. So I see this whole controversy, and as with desktop ad blocker software, the advertisers, the websites that were doing absurd levels of intrusive ads to where the sites were unusable and pissed off their readers are the reason why people embraced ad blockers, because I didn't use it for a long time and it just got so ridiculous on some of these sites that I started using one, even though I'm being completely hypocritical. It's like I own a casino, but I'm against gambling. So what do you think? And we just lost the Facebook thing. It went off, I guess, at times after an hour. What are your thoughts on any of this stuff?
I think it was most interesting that the #1 ad blocker program for iOS, he just announced that he's suspending operations of the program.
Peace,
because of, what was that?
Peace. It was called Peace, I think.
Yeah. He's now suspending the program because he realized it was being it went too far in the other direction. And I think that's the problem, is that people are willing to tolerate some advertising. This was actually what made Google, was that they figured out just the right sweet spot of advertising, having the right ads, not too many of them, not obtrusive. And of content that was interesting and relevant to you. Um, and then, companies went overboard with these ads. So we had the ad blockers and they went too far in the other direction. So now the companies who are no longer serving, whose ads are being blocked are saying, look, if you're going to block our ads, we're going to block our site. So now it's an escalation about who gets to see what. And that doesn't improve things for anybody.
Also, this is clearly a shot at Google, which is the
Clearly.
undisputed dominant player on desktop ads. And Facebook
Clearly,
and Apple are beginning to, on mobile, they're claiming more power.
Clearly, but it's also an interesting move by Apple because Apple doesn't actually block all ads. If you pay Apple, your ads will show up again. Which is kind of sleazy in my mind. I mean, that I think is abusing dominant position. We've talked about this in the past on the Google side, and I've said that I think Google has abused its dominant position. Here's a place where I think Apple is abusing its dominant position. What are your thoughts on this one, Dan?
I'm torn. I mean, I'm a consumer and a publisher. And I get as aggravated as anybody else when I look. I've said before, you go to
Well,
I visit sites on both sides. Go ahead.
I mean, on this specific issue, that Apple will allow some ads through.
They're being protective as they are all the time, and some people would argue that that's quality control. Others would argue that they can't play in that playground and it's unfair. And I would say I'm not going to hold them to a different standard than I hold Google or Walmart or Costco, that nobody has a right. I mean, Costco is the #2 retailer. Walmart's the #1 retailer in the United States. And they have their great value brand product, which is right at eye level with the others. And if they choose not to sell Furstenberg mayonnaise, but they're going to stock Hellmann's and Kraft mayonnaise and great value mayonnaise, and you can't get in there, and as a result, your business is much less than it would be otherwise, that's tough. That's why Sam Walton started a store and grew it rapidly, and that's capitalism. You're muted. Not that I'm complaining that you're muted. So anyway, I think we probably disagree on that. So okay, so I tried the Facebook thing, and we had a total of 60 pop-ins. We had 16 or 19 viewing at when it shut off at 58:30. We had 6 comments, 1 share, and 6 or 9 likes. I can't remember. So that was.
We probably should have told them that they could keep watching this on YouTube at some point.
I didn't realize. I was about to say something, but it shut off 90 seconds early. So anyway, but I had never used this app before. It's Dimensions app or whatever, so I'm playing with it. But it's fun. So okay, I guess I should switch to Meerkat or Periscope. What do you think? For the last few minutes here.
Like I care. Whatever.
I'll do Periscope for a few minutes. I'm going to go live. All right, so next up, Alan, is what do you think about ad blockers? How do you balance the need to monetize comment, to pay for the writer who writes the story, with the fact that advertising is abused by some outlets?
I'll put it this way.
To where people do ad blockers.
I'll put it this way. I don't use an ad blocker. I don't use an ad blocker. And sites that have too many ads don't get visited by me. That's how I solve the problem.
So you're like me, I guess. It's a compromise. If you go to I mean, I don't mind a pre-roll before a video. I don't mind if I'm watching really good content and I have to watch commercials like I would on broadcast TV. But I don't want pop-ups and like this thing I have to wait 20 seconds. You know, all this stuff. It goes on and on and on, to where it's so ridiculous that you install the ad blocker and then those bad actors are punishing the good ones who are trying to be reasonable. But the bad actors often make more money, so I don't know. It's like anything else. All right, next up is something I know nothing about. I added this at the last minute. It's the ECPA Amendments Act of 2015. I think, this is about
Yeah.
warrant.
So here's the
It's the newest warrantless wiretapping type
no,
thing, sort of.
no. It's actually just the opposite.
Okay, what do we got here?
So what we have here is currently the ECP, the current law on the books basically says email on a server can be considered abandoned after 18 months. And therefore, the government can ask for it without needing a warrant and without notification. This says, hey, wait a minute. People are storing their email on these central servers now. People are storing all sorts of data on central servers. Therefore, abandoned is a bogus idea. So it basically amends the law to remove that ridiculous presumption. And then further goes ahead and says, you need a warrant to get the data, and you need to actually notify the owner of the data in a timely fashion. It's a little vague on what exactly timely fashion is. And there are some exemptions, but this is a massive amount better than what we have today, which basically allows government agencies to ask for data and to just get it without any review, without any challenge in court, without any knowledge, without anything. And no surprise, Google, Facebook, Microsoft are all supporting this change.
All right, so
Also, no surprise, federal law enforcement agencies are opposing it.
So the devil's advocate position, as we with all these, is the Boston Marathon or whatever it is. Some incidents occurred. You're unsuspecting. There's been some sort of attack.
Real simple answer, Dan. Get a warrant. It's not that hard to get a warrant.
It's when you're in hot pursuit, and you recover a phone. How long? I don't know how long does it take to get a warrant. They found a cell phone. They got the tag, and that set the bomb off, right? So the cops find some piece of it. This is 10 minutes after the explosion. There's bodies strewn about. They've got some information. They want to find whose phone this is, anything about it. They want 6 degrees out on anybody that's called on this phone, that sort of thing. And they need it as soon as possible because this guy's headed for a train station or something. How long does it take for them to pull something up in a database or call the NSC or whatever it is? I have no idea. Versus waking up a judge.
You'd probably know that better than
I don't know. I honestly don't know how much
but
of
I would
a hindrance
strongly
it would be.
suggest it is not that difficult to get a federal, to get a federal judge to issue a fairly broad search warrant, especially if you're in hot pursuit. And hot pursuit rules actually don't necessarily require a warrant these days, if I remember correctly, and I won't swear that I do. Cybernaut will probably correct me on this in a couple of minutes.
That is correct.
But-
You don't. I mean, if an explosion occurs and you see a guy running from the explosion, looking over his shoulder, and you're chasing him, you can pursue him. I mean, this sort of thing. Hot pursuit things still apply. The question is whether you're allowed to gather data so that when an incident occurs, you can get it quicker. And there's an argument that just have the phone companies store the data, as they already do.
That's also, however, different than what's specifically being addressed in these changes. These changes specifically refer to things like email. And in theory, it refers to things that wouldn't have been applicable in hot pursuit anyway. Because it only applied to email that had been sitting there for 18 months.
Yeah, I would think that if there's some civil matter, I don't know how you balance it. They need to figure out a way to balance it. If there's some civil matter, they think
A warrant! That's really fucking simple. That's
Correct.
the
Well,
balance.
that's what I'm saying. If it's, if they think you were embezzling from the bank you work at, and they want to look at all your transactions, your emails, everything, they can get a warrant for that, right? Um, but in the event of the Boston Marathon bombing, where you're freaking out, or 9/11, is there another plane? What's going on? And you think you have a lead, and you're trying to gather data quickly. If there's a real sense of urgency, how do you accommodate both of those things? And I think it's something that we're going to go back and forth on, and hopefully they'll figure it out. But then the other guys are one step ahead of us always, just like spammers or credit card hackers. And then we'll have to keep adjusting as we go and try to find the right mix. Okay, next is AT&T sues 3 former employees over secret phone unlocking scheme. This isn't really something to debate. It's just kind of interesting. That back, it was the same year before, I guess it was Congress voted a law and the president signed it that allowed you to unlock your phone. And there were ways to do it prior to that. You call it like jailbreaking, or is this the same as jailbreaking, or is this is
No, no, no. This is very different than
this
jailbreak.
is like making your phone think that you've reached the end of your contract when you haven't yet.
This
That's what.
isn't really making it think you've reached the end. It's basically making it so that it could talk to a carrier besides the carrier you bought it from.
Okay. So this would be like a Verizon, AT&T. It still wouldn't let you go to T-Mobile or to Sprint. Or I don't know if it's the same. It used to be CDMA versus the other now.
Yeah, it's
It's
more
all one
like
thing now?
T-Mobile, AT&T, or taking your your iPhone international so you could use it in another country.
So there was this company that allowed you to pay a fee, and then they had a couple employees at AT&T who gave them PIN numbers, and they weren't actually doing it. It was happening rapid fire. They were able to get unlock codes for these phones, but then AT&T determined that it was happening quickly under these 2 guys' accounts, so they identified the 2 guys, and of course I guess they're getting charged, or they're being sued, and all this was for naught. A few months later, it became totally legal to do this, so you wouldn't have to pay or scheme to be able to do it. So I just thought that was interesting. And then the last thing is huge news. It turns out that Volkswagen, the it was the federal, which commission? It was not the EPA. What was it? A U.S. federal agency working with California authorities determined that Volkswagen had installed software. I think it was from '09 to 2015, and what it would do is, if they were running an emissions test on a Volkswagen, or I think an Audi, that it would turn the emissions fully on, so you would pass the emissions test. But then when there was no test being conducted, there was some lesser degree of emissions. I think at one point they said, or less degree of emissions prevention or control. I think some say it was like 40 times higher. And so they're making them recall, assuming this happens, recall like over 400 million or 400,000 vehicles. The potential fines could be like $37,000 per vehicle. So we're talking potentially $18 billion fine, which I think is about 2 years of Volkswagen's profit. So this is a big deal. Impressive technology and ballsy, but not for a good cause. What do you? This is any thoughts on this, Alan? This is wild.
It's not too hard to detect when you're doing emissions testing these days, especially since the emissions testing basically means taking the computer and plugging it into the onboard, the onboard computer and saying, okay, go into emissions testing mode. It's really not that difficult. I mean, it's pretty simple engineering, pretty stupid, but pretty simple.
37,000 per car is a huge fine. This could really be bad. Uh, Also, presumably there would be. I guess you can still drive the vehicles, and I don't know how you could recall and fix it.
Oh, it's probably pretty easy to fix it.
But that would reduce the mileage. What was the
Yeah.
what would be the reason to do this, right? This would increase the miles per gallon rating on the vehicle.
Yeah.
So all of a
Yep.
sudden you can have 400,000 lawsuits from drivers who bought a 30 mile per gallon car, and now it's 26 or whatever it is. So we're gonna have a class action lawsuit. So it's a good day for lawyers.
Usually is.
But that's the main. This was dumb. I mean, this is like a Darwin Award thing. If they did it, right? We don't know. Alan Furstenberg, how was your Google Plus week?
Was not too bad. I followed the Polymer Summit earlier this week, and I've been working on some Polymer projects, which have been fun. Met up with a longstanding client of mine. It's always good to meet up with them and chat about their plans. Otherwise, moving on.
Awesome.
How was your?
Mine was okay. It was a print week, so that's obviously always hectic. And some interesting local
You're
stuff.
amazingly awake for a print week.
Huh?
You're amazingly awake for a print week.
I am. You were only able to troll me a few times compared to normal. So, but yeah, so I'm making a dish for some. I'm gonna give this to some neighbors to try. Scalloped potatoes, which they've never had real ones. They do it out of a box. So I'm actually making real ones. I got all my ingredients spread out there. It's quite an ordeal to do it. But I had the kid slicing the potatoes. He did a pretty good job. And so that'll be fun. But mainly I'm going to sleep for the next couple days, which I'm looking forward to. So anyway, hope you enjoyed watching. Appreciate the Facebook comments. Any final comments we want to hit on here? I'm going to look at the YouTube ones if you look at the Google Plus.
Facebook comments? Because you didn't say any.
John Jensen was talking a little bit. I only got like a total of 6. Someone joined, but I don't know what that means because I've just used it. I just got the app today. I don't know what it is, but the YouTube comments are fairly light. So
Very light.
like Alan is the star.
Like mine.
Yeah. So let me look. I'm going to look at Google Plus here.
Sai's been chatting with us. He basically agreed with me, saying it's really pretty trivial to get a warrant.
Scott Brown invited me to join. Sexy Yellow is a top Google comment here. Let me look down. Cybernaut and 2 others. Yeah, he says he knows at least. Sai says he knows at least one person at Treasury who gets a. I got to minimize this Hangout thing that's stopped me. Okay, he says I know at least one person at Treasury that has an open warrant, basically up to their discretion to fill in the name and address. FISA warrants can be obtained in a matter of hours. That is the. What's FISA, the acronym? Foreign, it's a special court used for terrorism set up by the Supreme Court. I think the Chief Justice actually appoints the members, right?
Basically, yeah.
It's under the authority of John Roberts. So anyway. Okay, so we appreciate you watching, and we'll sort through all these comments we got tonight. We appreciate it, and it was fun and a good quick show. I think it's because we started on time or close to it. Anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate it. This is Google Plus Week. We're here every Friday night around 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. 8:30 p.m. Eastern Friday night, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Friday night on Google Plus, YouTube Live, and sometimes Meerkat or Periscope or now Facebook Live. And we actually, Facebook beat us almost 2-1 as far as viewers. So we'll see. But YouTube will catch up at the end. I'll try to see what the metrics are on the Facebook views over time. But anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'm Dan McDermott. I'll see you with my co-host, Alan Furstenberg, in New York. We'll see you next time for another exciting edition of Google Plus Week. Cheers.